They only need to get a permit to go ahead. They don't need a government grant, a government handout, a press release, a photo op. They really need one thing from Mark Carney: get out of the way.
Pierre Poilievre was invited onto a CBC podcast called The House, where he promptly proceeded to humiliate the host as she tried desperately to bait him into something. Pierre Poilievre held his ground, maintained his composure, and showed her exactly how it's done. Welcome back to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Pierre Poilievre was invited onto a show called The House. Now, I'm pretty convinced that the CBC only invited him on there because they are desperate to try to change the narrative away from the fact that they refuse to talk to anybody from the conservative side of the aisle, that they refuse to invite anybody on that's not a hardcore far left liberal. And then as soon as they get Pierre Poilievre on the show, do they try and talk to him? Do they want to understand? Do they want to flesh out his ideas? No, they just look for some way to create drama and to tell their fans that they scored some points, which of course is how Pierre Poilievre ends up beating them every single solitary time, because they're coming from such a position of anger and hatred. Now, this one, I did cut it up a little bit because there are some things that aren't worth listening to. But for the most part, I'm just going to play it and watch it along with you because, I mean, Pierre Poilievre speaks for himself and everything that he says makes perfect sense to me. But there are times that I just want to point out how humiliated and how badly this woman handled this interview. And if I'm honest, I'm just going to be laughing at her a little bit because Pierre Poilievre did it with such professionalism. And the far left host was anything but professional. You could almost see how she sat around that morning over the coffee table with her girlfriends, sharpening up her pencil to try to make it seem like she was going to get win over on Pierre Poilievre or get points against him, which of course is not how it worked out. And we're going to see that together. But before we do, I would encourage all of you to like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this channel with all of your socials. If you're watching from your mobile phone and you know how to do the hype, or if your phone allows you to do the hype, you can hype my video. I'd appreciate that. All right, let's get into this. All right, as we get started, I want to draw something to your attention. Look at the amount of questions this lady has in front of her. Look at the amount of paper for all of her talk about saving the environment. She can't apparently use a tablet or use a laptop or even keep these questions on track of these questions inside of her head. No, she's got to have it spread out across the entirety of the desk in front of her. There are various piles depending on which subject that she hopes to bring up. And by contrast, Pierre Poilievre, leader of the Conservative Party and leader of the official opposition, sits there with not a scrap of paper, no tablet, no telephone, nothing. Just prepared to answer any question that you ask him, and prepared to do so off the top of his head, which indicates two things. One, that he's being honest because he doesn't have to have the answers written down. They're coming off the top of his head. And two, that he is prepared in a degree that the Liberals are not. They run around with these pre-prepared answers, put in 3-ring binders, or in the case of Mark Carney, put onto a teleprompter. And whenever they try to come off that script, off that narrative, the Liberal Party always collapses and falls, makes great content. I just want to put that out there for those of you that might be supporters of Mark Carney and watching my show. And now you can see the difference in the caliber of the individual. And the caliber of the individual matters more than the moniker of conservative or liberal or NDP. Okay, let's watch this train wreck and, get your popcorn, because I'm telling you right now, there's a lot of entertainment in it.
We've had to be very patient with Mark Carney because he's now been Prime Minister for 6 months. Hard to believe. And he hasn't delivered a permit for a single nation-building project.
Shameful.
In fact, construction is down. Investment is down by $62 billion under Mark Carney, which is the biggest net outflow of investment in history, according to the National Bank.
Outflow of investment is people earning money in Canada and taking it out of the system and investing that money in other places. And primarily in this case, it's going to be invested in the United States and in Donald Trump's economy.
And so far, he's succeeded at setting up an office with one employee, and he sent a list of 5 projects that were already approved or almost approved before he got there. And now he's picking up the football in the end zone to spike it. But in reality, some of the projects that he put on his list have already been under construction. It's really incredible to see a prime minister show up and take credit for something that happened before he even got there, and then claim that it is a new achievement. But I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think he's been very good at confusing activity with achievement. Lots of meetings, lots of politicians patting themselves on the backs.
So is Danielle Smith confused then?
So
is that what you're saying?
If you look at the actual results, there have been none. As for a pipeline,
Desperate to try to change the subject, desperately, she interrupts him and tries to talk about Danielle Smith. The far left is all about Danielle Smith trying to say to the Alberta voter to be patient. They think that because the far left thinks like in groupthink, right? Because they're herd animals and they, follow the one person. They believe because Danielle Smith said this, we're all going to be like, oh, let's all be patient. Of course, Danielle Smith wasn't talking to Canadians. She was talking to Albertans who are on the very edge of ready to get out of the country completely. It's funny that they'll say that we should be listening to Danielle Smith, but when Danielle Smith says we got to get rid of Bill C-69 or Bill C-48 or get rid of the emissions cap, there's not a peep coming out of them. They start calling her names. This is the very same people. I just want to tip the hat to Pierre Poilievre, who this woman tried very desperately to bait him, and he simply continued on with the narrative like she wasn't even in the room.
To the Pacific, we already had one. It was called the Northern Gateway. Justin Trudeau killed it.
Well, the courts said that there was not sufficient consultation.
With respect, the project was approved, and the Trudeau cabinet killed it. They vetoed it. That is a fact. We have 38 projects the federal government has been holding up that are in the Impact Assessment Act system already.
They're in progress right now.
They only need to get a permit to go ahead. They don't need a government grant, a government handout, a press release, a photo op. They really need one thing from Mark Carney: get out of the way.
Get out of the way. I've been saying it since the very beginning. Mark Carney and the Liberal government are the single largest block to prosperity in this country. They want to tell you that it's all about the children. They want to tell you it's all about the future. They want to tell you that it's all about this, it's all about that. Doesn't matter what it's all about. What matters only is that they are the problem. They are the block that's in the way. They are the ones that are stopping the progress. And if you believe for 1 second that they don't know in Alberta that they're sitting on trillions of dollars and that there's tens and tens of thousands of jobs that are available to all of the men that are out of work, I mean, obviously they're aware. They know that the money is there. Everybody knows the money is there, just like everybody knows that the Liberal government is the problem, not the solution.
Danielle Smith saying, be patient. How is it that you're saying nothing to see here when so many other people seem to think, across the political spectrum, seem to think that this is meaningful?
Again, I think she's right. We have to be patient because of Mark Carney's snail's pace. I mean,
what a burn.
That's not what she's saying.
What I'm saying is that Mark Carney has been prime minister for 6 months. Now, he promised that we would move at unprecedented speeds, that this was like wartime. 6 months has gone by. Let me give you an example. The Germans built an import terminal for LNG from concept to completion in 194 days. That is not the permit or the announcement or the press release. That means the thing was functional in about the amount of time Mark Carney has been prime minister, during which time he has not approved a single major project. What he has done is taken 5 projects that were basically approved already, sent them to yet another bureaucracy, which is going to review them and consider them going ahead. And there is not an oil pipeline on that list. I don't want to be negative, so I'm going to be positive here. We're proposing the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would get the government out of the way so that we could rapidly build, the private industry without taxpayer subsidies could build pipelines, mines, LNG terminals, nuclear plants, and more. It would expedite the 38 projects that have been waiting for federal approval, and it would invite the hundreds more that the federal government is blocking, according to Scott Moe. So let's pass the sovereignty. I'm offering Mark Carney to take the act and pass it. I'll give him credit for it.
I've been covering you for years. I cannot recall hearing you talk about concerns around.
She's been covering him for years. I don't think so. She's been attacking him for years. That I would believe. Look at her reading it right off the paper, right? Like, you know what I mean? This was a prepared question because she couldn't get him on the other narrative. So she has to change the subject now. Now it's all about the environment all of a sudden.
On climate change. Do you worry about what climate change will do to our planet, Pierre Poilievre?
Sure, that's why I'm so disappointed with the
This is a spectacular answer. I mean, wow.
very problematic approach of the Liberal government, which has been to drive up energy costs and block projects from going ahead that would help the environment.
So are
I'll
you an
give you one
environmentalist,
example.
Pierre Poilievre?
Sure, you can call me whatever you like.
No, well,
but
I want to know what you'd call yourself. I mean, we are talking about like sea levels rising, worried about loss of biodiversity. You worry about those things.
First of all, let me just say they've been talking about sea levels rising for, I don't know, 55 or 60 years. And yet still these billionaires buy seafront property and they go to tropical islands. I'm not convinced that there's, any rising of the seas. If it rises a little bit, that doesn't support the narrative of the far left.
Sure, and I also have solutions. Like if we were to displace dirty Asian coal-fired plants with clean Canadian natural gas, according to the National Bank, we could reduce global emissions by 2.5 billion tons, which is 3 times the emissions of all of Canada for a year. But to do that, you need liquefaction terminals like the one that Prime Minister Harper approved, LNG Canada. And we shouldn't be talking about having one more. We should be talking about having 18 or 19 LNG liquefaction plants. That's the number that were proposed when the Liberals took office. And so what I propose, let's take our natural gas, which is very clean, which is very cheap in Canada. Right now, we only get $3 per million metric British thermal units. And let's sell it to Asia for $14. We could help power the most populous continent by getting them off of dirtier coal and reducing global emissions. But the real difference between myself and the Liberals on this is they believe in keeping it in the ground. Those are Mr. Carney's words, by the way. He wrote them. We can debate whether he's flip-flopped on that as well. Or the conservative approach, which is let's use our energy to grow the paychecks of our people and protect the environment. They believe in energy poverty. I believe in energy abundance, and that is the approach that we would take to the environment.
You say you're worried about climate change. Mm-hmm. Why have we not seen you ever commit to emissions reductions targets?
I just did right now.
That's not a target. That's saying.
I mean, this woman is not even paying attention to his words. She's just looking for something. And now he says, no, I know how we can clean up billions of tons of greenhouse gases from China without any problem at all. All we need to do is open up some liquefaction plants and get the government out of the way. And she's like, all of a sudden, no, that's not a target. I think you should stick to one narrative, don't you?
We should do more to reduce our emissions. That's not about meeting the Paris targets. That's not saying our 2030 targets are right, wrong, should be higher, lower.
The current government is not meeting its emissions targets.
But I'm asking whether you think those are valuable targets, not about what the federal government is doing, which you've been clear about.
Oh, now all of a sudden it's not about the federal government. I'm telling you. I mean, who pays this lady? You and I pay her, unfortunately. That's the thing that just occurred to me now.
It would be very easy. In fact, it would be very easy to meet all of those targets if we include the global reductions that the export of Canadian nuclear and natural gas would engender. And so I'd say, sure, not only could we could displace the equivalent of 3 years of emissions in Canada by sending our Canadian natural gas over to Asia and displacing dirty coal. I mean, the Asian economies are adding these coal-fired plants one after the other because they don't have access to affordable natural gas. We have the most affordable gas. It's easy for us to liquefy it because our cold climate does most of the work. And we have the shortest shipping distances to both Asia and Europe of any country in the Americas. So why would we not use that kind of pragmatic approach that enriches rather than impoverishes us?
I want to turn to another.
And just like that, she needs to change the subject. Just like that, she no longer wants to pin Pierre Poilievre on his environmental policy. All of a sudden, she doesn't want to talk about greenhouse gases in the Liberal government. All of a sudden, she wants to change the subject. Oh, my Lord. You could tell from her body language that she didn't want to let him finish, but she couldn't very well interrupt him because she tried already 2 or 3 times and he simply ignored her. But you saw her flipping and flopping and twitching in her chair. I mean, that body language speaks volumes.
Because our
Sure.
time is finite. You have called on the government to get rid of the temporary foreign worker program. The Prime Minister has said he will adjust the program to make it more strategic. Why do you believe that there is never a need for these workers outside of the agricultural sector?
See, the agricultural sector is different. The agricultural sector is primarily a deal that Canada has with Mexico, and it's been in place for many, many, many years. It works really well. There's never been any problem with it because people, they come here to Canada in the summer and then they go home, and they're quite happy to do that. What Pierre Poilievre is talking about is these international corporations like Walmart and other examples, Tim Hortons and stuff, taking advantage of people that are not. These are people that are coming out of the Asian continent, and they're being exploited by people that are being hired. They're being paid a pittance, and they're being forced to live in deplorable conditions. Nothing that Canada should be fostering.
Because we have unemployed Canadians. Since Mr. Carney took office, we've hemorrhaged 86,000 jobs. Really hard to believe.
Surely some of that is related to U.S. tariffs and the uncertainty.
First of all, I don't think it's very polite of her to keep interrupting people. And secondly, Mark Carney already said that the tariffs are off 85% of our product. Nothing has changed from when Mark Carney, there's nothing changed except for some steel industry jobs. And if you want me to believe that that cost 86,000 jobs, then Mark Carney should have been more on top of it. Mark Carney should have been all about getting those jobs somehow back into the country. I have a perfect idea. Why don't you get out of the way, repeal Bill C-69 and Bill C-48 and the emissions cap, and watch how 86,000 jobs rapidly come back into the country.
The tariffs that Mr. Carney promised he would manage to get rid of through his promise to negotiate a win by July 21st. And it's also, according to the Business Council, the red tape of the federal government is responsible for more economic damage than even the tariffs. That's what the business community says. But, it's true that in fairness, Mr. Carney has failed to keep his promise on negotiating a deal, and that has obviously...
In fairness, he has failed. Oh, what a backhanded comment that was.
Hurt our economy.
He said he would only sign a deal if it was good for Canada. He did not promise a deal under no conditions.
He promised to, quote, negotiate a win. He promised to have a deal by July 21st. Those are broken promises. Now, you asked me about temporary foreign workers, and but I had to respond to your interjection. And so on temporary foreign workers, we've got 350,000 people in Toronto alone who are unemployed. We have the worst job numbers since the 1990s for our youth. And when you have 14% unemployment for youth, it is appalling that we're bringing in low-wage temporary foreign workers who are exploited again and again, exploited by those seeking to profit off of paying below market wages. And the Liberal government is on track this year to having the largest number of temporary foreign workers in Canadian history, because I haven't blamed temporary foreign workers. I've said precisely the opposite. They're great people. They're not to blame. The Liberal government is to blame.
It's not their fault that they're searching for something better. I mean, we can't blame them for that. We can blame the Liberal government for not being prepared. We can blame the Liberal government for not allowing us to build houses at our own pace. We can blame the Liberal government for not allowing us to have high-paying jobs for these exact same people. If you believe that somebody's going to come across the world from, say, India to work in Walmart, you can believe that same individual will come across the world to work in the oil field. You can believe that same individual will come across the world to work in a refinery or an LNG factory or any of the supporting jobs that have to go along with that, dump trucks, and the list is so long. I mean, it's over 100,000 jobs just out of the LNG development alone, according to various experts. It's not the individual, it's the government, and it's the mismanagement of the program. It's the fact that these international corporations, who Mark Carney is deeply embedded with and meshed with, is exploiting this system, is taking advantage of it, because every time they get approval for a temporary foreign worker, the government picks up part of the wage. So they're making it hand over fist.
I worry for my family. I'll be honest with you. We have had very serious threats to the point where the RCMP decided that it merited protection for my family and I for over a prolonged period of time. And they've been multiple, and they have been serious threats. That's not what I was saying. What I'm saying is that we need to live in a society where people are free to express themselves, and where everyone understands they're going to have to hear contrary opinions. I hear them all the time. It's part of the
this example,
part
I
of
guess,
their reality.
is relevant.
She went on, droned on about some reporter who heard mean words and decided to cry and throw a temper tantrum. She opened up by asking about Charlie Kirk, may he rest in peace. And Pierre Poilievre was talking about how he's been threatened by the far left, and she wants to make the narrative about some reporter who was jeered in a situation because the people that she was surrounded by don't agree with her politics. Nobody threw anything at her. It was just some words that she didn't want to hear. As I've told you in the past, free speech cannot be regulated by somebody's feelings, by somebody's emotions. I don't care if you don't want to hear the words. That's your problem. If you think that people talking to you in a way that you don't like is your right to tell me to be silent, you have far too much arrogance, and you really have other things in your mind that you should be working on. If you believe that you have the right to go through this world without ever being upset or ever being confronted, then that level of arrogance also is something that you should be taking up with a professional. To try to convince me that I have to be silent because you are in a mood or because your feelings might be fragile, your fragility will switch with the seasons. Your fragility will switch by the minute. I can't be responsible for that. The truth is the truth is the truth. And of course, that's the problem, right? The truth hurts. We say that all the time. That's an expression. And that is the reason why the importance behind the freedom of speech. Of course, what is being overlooked by the far left narrative and by the far left in Canada is acceptance that somebody speaks a different mindset than you is the thing that you really need to begin to learn how to do. You have to accept the fact that I don't agree with you. You have to accept the fact that not only do I not agree with you, but I am prepared to do other things counter to what you are trying to do. I don't agree with you that much. Now, I know people on the far left are too fragile and too sensitive to hear people say to them, oh, I don't agree with you, and therefore they want to throw a fit and throw a tantrum and do all of the things that the internet is littered with. But that's exactly the point that I tell you freedom of speech is about. Because if you think for 1 second that that fragility wasn't there in 1776 when the American Revolution began, or in 1791 when the Constitution of the United States was ratified and amended to include the freedom of speech, because if you believe that this fragility of the human spirit or what people don't want to hear is a brand new concept, then I invite you to, look back at the history of mankind and understand that the reason that it had to be enshrined in law, the reason that it had to be enshrined as a constitutional right at birth or at citizenship was because the fragility of the human being has been that way for a long time. And the idea that we were going to stay silent so that it'll keep a very few people very happy without ever having any consistency. Feelings are never where you left them. 1 minute you're mad at your husband, the next minute you think he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. 1 minute you think that the Liberal Party is only at 15% popularity or approval rate. The next minute you think Mark Carney is going to save the whole wide world. Feelings are never where you left them. The truth is inalienable. The truth is always on target. The truth is, though you might not like it, it has a true bearing, and it won't be dissuaded by anybody's feelings. It won't be moved and shifted around. And that's the problem. Nobody wants to tell the far left that they're going to have to accept the fact that we live in a world that they may not agree with. And they're going to have to hear mean words, and they're going to have to hear things that they don't want to hear. The idea that they can tell me I have to be silent because they hear some words that they don't want to, or because somebody looks at them in a way that they don't agree with. That's all such a mountain of arrogance, a level of arrogance that they are not entitled to. They simply do not have the right to try and dictate to me what I can and cannot say. Now, I understand that there are certain things, and I've covered that, and I'll cover it again right now. We can't be name calling, we can't be swearing. Those are not things that are covered under freedom of speech. Threatening, these are not things that are covered under the freedom of speech. But to say that I don't agree with you, and if you don't like that, if you can't handle that, the problem isn't mine, the problem is yours. To say that I don't agree with your position and that, in fact, I have a completely opposite position, if that's enough to send you over the edge, if that's enough to send you crying or into the tubs of ice cream, you have much bigger problems than you are talking about, and you really should be focusing on that. This idea that words said by people that are counter to what you think is somehow your right and your ability and your privilege to shut me down, to silence me, is, again, I say, arrogant beyond compare. It is not further than being arrogant. It points to a self-centeredness that really you have to address, because the truth of the matter is that you will rely heavily on the ability to speak freedom of speech when your point is being the one that's being different from the narrative. You don't have any issue at all people don't have any issue at all trying to say, well, I don't agree with this position or I don't agree with that position. And then when it goes against them, they want to throw a temper tantrum and stomp their feet and say, oh, my poor feelings. Well, I think the narrative there that you need to see is that it's not about your feelings. I believe that your feelings might be part of the way that you think. And that's a discipline that you need to enshrine. That's a discipline that you need to discover. That's not my responsibility. I am not responsible for your feelings. I am not responsible for the way that you respond to my words. I am responsible for my own words. And in that vein, in that purview, I choose to speak words that I feel to be true, and I choose to do so in a way that is not, in fact, abrasive or using profanity or using anything that might be considered menacing. And in that expression of freedom of speech, I expect to be respected. I expect for you to say, I don't agree with you, but I allow you to enjoy your position. Though I do not agree, we are going to have to agree to disagree. This idea that you can throw a temper tantrum and all of a sudden all the billionaires on the far left are going to somehow punish somebody because they said something or they waved a flag that you didn't agree with, or they read the Bible, or a whole host of things that people are getting upset about is exactly the problem. And to think that Pierre Poilievre would stand his ground and be able to put Mark Carney in his place or this reporter in his place, and somebody would threaten his family. You got bigger problems, and you really need to be looking after your own ways of thinking rather than try to convince yourself that you're going to be silencing a person because they don't agree with you or they don't agree with any number of you. There was a time in this world that they believed it was flat. Here's an example of when one person stood his ground using speech. They believed the world was flat. And he said, no, the world is not flat. It is in fact round. And I can prove it. Now, they put him on house arrest because they tried him. They wanted to, take him out of the planet permanently. But of course, he proved, and they were stuck in a really terrible position. So they just put him on house arrest for the remainder of his life, him and, whatever staff that he had, because they couldn't bring themselves to ignore the truth. But it was one voice. It was one voice. So you don't have to have a large group of people that don't agree with you. You don't have to have any of that. What you have to have is a belief that what you're saying is true, and you have the right to do so without utilizing any of the things that I've gone up to right now, whether that be profanity, name calling, or menacing. Any of those kinds of things are not covered under the freedom of speech. But to disagree with you, that absolutely is covered under the freedom of speech. To tell you that I don't agree with you and to not be punished for that, that is 100% the epitome of the freedom of speech. And that is what separates us from all oppressors in the entire world, now, then, or in the future. That's just my opinion. You can let me know what your opinion is down in the comments. I would encourage all of you to like, share, thumbs up, hit the notification bell. I'm going to wrap here. Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.